I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the biggest buzzkill in this case. The simplicity, of course, is the attraction. Where's Jay Slater? Simple. He's the victim of foul play. How, who, and where exactly? Well, we don't know, but we do have the answer.
Banner's powerful and useful too. Is he though?
Do you have the answer? Okay, so what happens when we take the Airbnb suspect seriously? We're going to do that in this analysis. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the many of you who have subscribed. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button. Don't forget the live stream of the Alec Baldwin trial, and let's get started. In the past few days, I made a booking on Airbnb. Have you ever done that? Because it gives you some insight into what that's all about. Now, we've been referring to them as Airbnb suspects. And so doesn't that give us a big clue about what's going on here? Airbnb almost feels like social media meets homestays and accommodation, but it's actually a lot more formal than that. You've got to give up quite a lot of personal information. You have a profile on Airbnb, which means you've got to upload a photo of yourself, you've got to provide an address, you've got to provide your phone number, you've got to provide your email, bank details, etc. All of that information is verified, otherwise it doesn't work. Now, besides a record of where you are staying, Airbnb also maintains a profile of previous places you've stayed, along with assessments from your hosts. So with all of that on record, and I mean, by using Airbnb, you're putting your movements on record, you're putting yourself on record, you're putting your face on record. Why would you commit a crime if all one would have to do is follow up, which would make it laughably simple to track you down, which is precisely what investigators were able to do? How hard was it to track down these A&B people? Not hard at all. And they then interviewed them. The local police interviewed both men, and they determined both men weren't relevant to the investigation. And of course, social media knows much better than that. Even though they didn't speak to them, even though they don't know the details, social media knows better, right? Now, there's no argument young Jay could have chosen better acquaintances to head out of town with. There's no argument that there is a criminal backstory floating over this, quite an unpleasant one as well. By the same token, one does have to wonder, where were Jay's friends? When Jay was heading up to the northwest of the island, where were Jay's friends? What were they doing? Why did they part company? What was actually going on? Now, the answer may be exactly what we've been told, that Jay didn't want the night to end. He wanted the adventure to continue, and boy did it, from adventure to misadventure. Whereas his compadres at some point likely had enough. Most people, you would imagine, like even teenagers, on the third night of a rave, at the end of the kind of morning, you would think that you've had enough by then. And we know that Lucy had called it a night earlier. Is it the second night or the third night? I think it's, anyway, to their credit, even if Jay wasn't physically with Lucy and Brad, he'd kept them appraised with where he was and how he was. And that's why we've got quite a clear idea about where he was when he was last seen. Now, I do think a critical clue we get from those Snapchats is that Jay basically has a lead time of 1 to 2 hours, 3 hours tops, to vanish into thin air. On foot, I mean. So the calculus ought to be quite simple. How far can someone walk on foot from the viewpoint in 3 hours or less? In other words, after talking to Lucy and subsequent to searchers arriving in the area, how much time did Jay have to vanish? Not very long, I would wager. And this does seem to suggest, and this is important to emphasize, Jay is closer to the last pinpoint than people have assumed. In the previous video, we spoke about someone saying he could be right there, right next to the path, and you wouldn't know, 2 meters. And so I think a cogent strategy seems to me to be to identify potential shortcut options from the nearest paths radiating from the viewpoint. So use the viewpoint as your sort of central core, and then radiate outwards from there in all directions, and then identify shortcuts that radiate from the nearest paths, and then check unofficial shortcuts, things that where you could feel, well, maybe I could go through here to the path on the other side of the gorge or the other side of the ridge. But using the psychology of an increasingly desperate jay wanting to take shortcuts, perhaps to water, perhaps to shelter, or perhaps the sea. And on the way to wherever he was trying to get, something perhaps went wrong. Now, I have to say, in almost all the missing person searches I've covered, and there have been quite a few, the victims have been found surprisingly close to where they were last seen. Kylie Rodney is one of the best examples. She was found meters from the last ping point. But also Nicola Bulley and Nora Corrin. From Nicola Bulley and Nora Corrin, both within about a mile of where they were last seen. Nora Corrin slightly more. Casey Anthony and the victims in the Laurie Vallow case, very, very close to the central people involved. I think one can also include John Benet Ramsey and Madeleine McCann as well. Weren't they actually evidence of them found a lot closer than what people initially thought or imagined? Now, where victims are a lot further away, this is important as well. Think about Gilgo Beach, Chris Watts, Scott Peterson. Well, you tend to have a vehicle identified as part of the fabric. So if someone's not in the area, something that's going to give you an indication that someone's not in the area, well, then you need to bring in a vehicle. And that doesn't seem to be the case here. No vehicle has really ever been mentioned entering or leaving the area. I'm not sure what the CCTV setup is on that road. I think if you want to really investigate the foul play setup, like if I was Mark Williams Thomas and I thought it's definitely foul play, then I would identify all the CCTV cameras and find out what footage is on them in the morning, what vehicles were going in and out, and then start systematically excluding it. Of course, the Airbnb doesn't seem to have any. Now, from a criminal psychology perspective, I don't think it makes sense to leave so much information out there in terms of Airbnb and then commit a crime anyway, so that one can basically find you if they just follow up. And so I think that doesn't make sense. And so if you then shift focus to someone else, so now you're going to someone unknown, and now you've just taken a step back. Now there's really far too little butter spread over too much bread. You've now made things even less clear than they were, because now we can't take things further with what we know. Well, why not? I know this seems academic at this point, and I think sometimes when you're talking to people about evidence and being reasonable, when the point is that the evidence doesn't matter, it's what I believe, what I feel strongly about, then it doesn't even matter if you make the argument, because it's not about making an argument. It's about feeling strongly about something, belonging to this group. But I think there are 2 additional issues with wanting to make the Airbnb dudes prime suspects, if you're going to be intelligent about it. And it's called an alibi. That's the first port of call when you decide someone could have done something or not. Now think about it. When Lucy called the Airbnb, the men were still there along with their vehicle. So, another way of just checking on the whole thing is, what was their vehicle doing? Did anyone see their vehicle moving around? Did anyone see the vehicle go up to the viewpoint? Did the vehicle go up to the viewpoint? What do the telematics of the vehicle say? The more critical aspect is that when Lucy arrived there, the men were also still there. It wasn't as though they'd just come from somewhere else. They were at the Airbnb. Presumably they'd slept some more and they were preparing to check out. Now, who would commit a crime in a foreign country and stick around afterwards? Also, what's the motive? I've said this so many times. Jay was such a low-value target. He couldn't even pay for his own accommodation. Like if he needed somewhere to stay, if he was this high-rolling drug dealer, couldn't he pay for his own accommodation? And instead of paying for transport, he elected to walk. He could have even just said to Lucy, won't you call me a cab? This is where I am, whatever. So it's pretty incredible, this fanciful notion that a gangly 19-year-old suddenly becomes the center of some enormous underworld plot of mafiosos and drug lords. It's incredible from the perspective of looking at how social media deals with this and looking at how the mainstream media is now dealing with it. Boy, some folks have got a really overactive imagination. I mean, it's really interesting, but it's not very realistic. I mean, it's possible that he stumbled onto a Mexican drug den in Tenerife and blew the lid off one of the biggest underground operations in Europe. Anything's possible. And I'm not here to say that there's only one possibility here, but we're talking about possibilities and probabilities. And so, yeah, anything's possible. It's possible that he stumbled into a massive drug den, or it's possible he just stumbled. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening. The search continues, and again, our thoughts are with the family and friends, and also with the searchers that are every day plodding through that terrain, searching. It's got to be quite a thankless task. But anyway, our thoughts are with them. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.